My mom insisted on planning my wedding. At first, it felt like support, like she just wanted to help to be involved to make things easier for me. And I let her, because saying no didn't feel right. She handled everything. The venue, the guest list, the details. I thought I could trust her with. And for a while, it all looked perfect, until small things started going wrong. Not big enough to stop everything, but just enough to feel off. Things I never approved.
Decisions I didn't make.
People being invited that I didn't even know about. At first, I thought it was miscommunication, until I realized something. None of it was accidental, because every time something went wrong, it somehow worked in her favor. That's when I stopped trusting the process and started paying attention to what she was actually doing, because this wasn't about planning anymore. It was about control. And the closer we got to the wedding, the more it started to feel like it wasn't mine at all. My name is Emily. I'm 29 now, and at the time this happened, I was engaged and about 8 months away from my wedding. It was supposed to be a simple process. Not small, not rushed, just manageable. I had a clear idea of what I wanted. Nothing overly detailed, just something that felt like me. Calm, organized, and not overwhelming. My fiancé, Daniel, was the same way. He wasn't focused on the details, but he cared about the outcome. He trusted me to lead it, and I was comfortable doing that. At least in the beginning. My mom had always been involved in everything. Not in an aggressive way. Just present. She liked being part of decisions. Liked knowing what was happening. And growing up, that felt normal. She was organized, detail-focused, and very good at making things happen. So when the wedding planning started, her involvement didn't feel unusual. It felt expected. She offered to help almost immediately, not in a way that felt forced, just naturally, saying she had experience, that she knew how these things worked, that she could make it easier for me. And at the time, that made sense, because weddings are a lot to manage. And having someone who already understands the process feels like an advantage. So I said yes. Not completely handing everything over, just letting her take the lead on certain parts. At least, that's what I thought I was doing. At first, it felt helpful. She started organizing things quickly, looking into venues, contacting vendors, putting together options. And everything she brought to me looked good.
Structured. Clear.
Easy to move forward with. It felt like things were progressing faster than I expected, which made it easy to trust her more. And the more I trusted her, the more I stepped back. Not intentionally, just gradually. Because when someone seems to have everything under control, you don't feel the need to step in. You let it happen. You assume it's being handled correctly. That's what I did. I focused on the bigger picture, the parts that felt more personal, while she handled the logistics. At least that's how it looked. There were small moments, though. Things that didn't stand out enough at the time. But looking back, they were there from the beginning. Like how she would make decisions before asking me. Not major ones. Just small adjustments. Changing a detail here. Confirming something there. And then telling me after. Framing it like it was easier that way. At the time, it felt efficient. Not controlling. Just helpful. There were also moments where she would dismiss certain things I wanted. Not directly. Just suggesting alternatives. Better options. More practical choices. And the way she explained it made sense. So I didn't push back. Because nothing felt important enough to turn into a disagreement. Everything still looked good. Everything still felt like it was coming together. Daniel noticed it a few times. Small comments. Asking if I was okay with certain decisions. Nothing serious. Just checking. And every time, I told him it was fine. Because I believed it was. Because nothing had happened yet to make me question it. The venue was booked. The date was set. Vendors were being confirmed. And everything moved forward without any obvious problems. On the surface, it looked perfect. Organized. Efficient. Exactly what you would want in a situation like that. And that made it easy to ignore the small things. The moments where I wasn't fully involved. The decisions that didn't completely feel like mine. Because the overall picture, still worked. It still made sense. And when the outcome looks right, you don't question the process. You assume it's just part of getting there. That's where I stayed. In that version of things. The one where everything was still working. The one where nothing felt wrong enough to stop. Because I trusted her. And I trusted that what she was doing was for me. Until something started happening that didn't fit into that version anymore. And once that started, it became harder to ignore the fact that not everything being done was actually for me at all. The first real problem didn't look like a problem at all. Not at first. It was small. The kind of thing you almost ignore. We were reviewing the guest list one evening. Just going through names, making sure everything was balanced. Family, friends, people from both sides. Nothing complicated. Until I saw a few names I didn't recognize. At first, I thought I had just missed something. Maybe distant relatives. Maybe people Daniel had mentioned once. So I asked her, "Who are these?" She answered immediately. Didn't pause. Family, friends. Simple. Confident. Like it didn't need more explanation. And for a moment I accepted that. Because it sounded reasonable. But then I looked closer. There weren't just one or two names. There were several. Grouped together. And that's when something felt slightly off. Not wrong. Just out of place. I asked again. A little more directly this time. "I don't think I know them."
She smiled.
Not dismissive. Just certain. "You were younger. You probably don't remember." That answer should have settled it. And for a second it almost did. Because it gave me something to place it under. Something easy to accept. But something about the way she said it stayed with me. Not the words. The tone. It wasn't offering information. It was closing the conversation. And that was new. Still, I didn't push it. Because it wasn't big enough. It didn't affect anything immediately. So I let it go. The next issue came a few days later. The venue. I had already agreed to one. Not impulsively. I had taken time. Looked at options. Chose something that felt right. Simple. Open. Exactly what I wanted. And then she called me. Saying she had made a small adjustment. Just a change in layout. Something about it working better for the number of guests. I didn't think much of it. Until I saw the updated plan. It wasn't a layout change. It was a completely different setup. More formal. More structured. Not what I had chosen. Not even close. I asked her about it. And again, she had an answer ready. "It's more appropriate." That was the word she used. Appropriate. Not better. Not what I wanted. Just appropriate. And again, it sounded reasonable on the surface. But it didn't match what I had originally decided. And that was the first moment it felt like something had been replaced. Not adjusted. Replaced. I remember pausing for a second, trying to decide if it was worth pushing back. And then I didn't. Because everything was already moving forward. Because changing things back would complicate everything. Because it still looked good. Just not like mine. That was the shift. Small. But clear. After that, I started noticing more. Little things. Details I hadn't approved. Flowers that weren't what I picked. Colors that were slightly different. Music suggestions I never agreed to. And every time I asked, there was an explanation. Always reasonable. Always structured in a way that made it hard to argue. It works better. It fits the theme. It's more elegant.
Words that sounded right.
But didn't feel right. And the more it happened, the more I realized something. None of these were mistakes. They were decisions. Made without me. Then explained to me after. That was the difference. And once I saw that clearly, I couldn't unsee it. Daniel noticed it again. More directly this time. He asked why things kept changing. Why the details didn't match what we had originally discussed. And for the first time, I didn't have a simple answer. Because I couldn't say it was just adjustments anymore. It wasn't. It was something else. Something consistent. Something controlled. I didn't confront her about it yet. Not directly. because I didn't fully understand it. I just knew something wasn't lining up. The wedding was still moving forward. Everything was still being handled, but it didn't feel like it was being built for me anymore. It felt like something else was taking shape, something I hadn't chosen. And that was the moment the thought finally settled in. Not fully, not completely,
but enough to stay.
what if this wasn't just about helping? What if she was changing things on purpose? After that, I stopped looking at each issue as separate, because on their own they were easy to explain. Small changes, minor adjustments, things that didn't seem important enough to question. But together, they started forming something consistent. And once I saw that, I couldn't go back to ignoring it. I didn't confront her yet. I didn't question everything directly, because I wanted to understand it first, not emotionally, just clearly. So I started paying attention differently, not just to what was changing, but when it was changing, and how often. And the timing became clear almost immediately. Every time I made a decision, something about it shifted shortly after.
Not instantly.
Just delayed enough to feel unrelated at first, but consistent enough to notice once you looked for it. That's when I decided to test it.
Not openly. Just quietly.
I chose something small, something easy to track. Flowers. A specific arrangement. A color combination I knew I would recognize immediately. I sent it to her.
Clearly.
Confirmed it. She agreed. No hesitation. Said it looked perfect. Said she would take care of it. Nothing about that moment felt unusual. That was important, because I needed to see what would happen next. A couple of days later, she showed me the update. And it was different. Not completely. Not in a way that would stand out to someone else. Just adjusted.
Different flowers.
Slightly different tones. More structured. More formal. Less like what I chose. More like what she preferred. I didn't react right away. I just looked at it. Then I asked, "Why is it different?" She didn't pause. Didn't reconsider. "It looks better this way." That was it. No discussion. No question. Just a decision already made. And that confirmed something. This wasn't miscommunication. It wasn't confusion. It was replacement. Something I chose. Being turned into something else. Every time. After that, I paid attention to everything. More closely than before. The guest list again. I went back through it, name by name, comparing it to the earlier version. And I saw it clearly. More additions.
People I didn't know.
People she had connections to. And every time I asked, the same kind of answer. Family, friends. Important connections. People who should be there. Words that sounded reasonable, but weren't mine. Then I looked at the venue again. Not just the layout. The full setup. And I noticed something I hadn't before. The structure had changed in a very specific way. More formal seating. More traditional arrangements. Less open space. Less flexibility. Exactly the kind of setup she would prefer. Not me. That's when it became clear. This wasn't random. It was directional. Everything was moving toward a specific version. More formal. More controlled. More hers. That realization didn't come all at once. It built slowly. Across different decisions. Different moments. Each one confirming the same thing. Until it stopped feeling like coincidence. And started feeling like design. I tested it again. Another small decision. Music this time. I chose something simple.
Specific. Sent it to her.
She agreed again. Same tone. Same confidence. And a few days later, it changed. Not completely. Just adjusted. Different style. Different tone. More aligned with what she liked. That's when it stopped being a question. Because once something happens twice in the same way, it's not accidental. And this had happened more than twice. That was the shift. I stopped giving it the benefit of the doubt. Stopped trying to explain it in a way that made sense. and started seeing it for what it was. Intentional. Daniel noticed it too, more clearly now. He started asking questions more directly. Why things didn't match. Why decisions kept shifting. And this time, I didn't dismiss it. I didn't explain it away. I just agreed. Because I could see it too. That was the first time I said it out loud. Not fully. Just enough. It's been happening a lot. And even saying that changed something. Because once you acknowledge a pattern, you can't go back to ignoring it. After that, I started looking at earlier moments again. The ones I had dismissed. The small changes I didn't question.
And they all fit now.
Every adjustment. Every better option. Every decision made without me. It all pointed in the same direction. Towards something I hadn't chosen. That was the part that stayed with me. Not just that things were changing, but that they were changing the same way every time. Toward her preferences. Away from mine. That's when the question shifted. Not what is happening.
But why?
Because this wasn't about helping anymore. Helping doesn't replace someone's choices. Helping supports them. This was something else. Something controlled. Something consistent. And once I saw that clearly, there was no going back. Because now I wasn't looking at a few changes. I was looking at a pattern. And patterns don't exist without intention. Which meant one thing. This wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about what she wanted it to be. And the more I thought about that, the more one question stayed with me. If this keeps going the same way, then whose wedding is it actually going to be? Once I accepted it was intentional, I stopped waiting for things to change. Because they weren't going to. Not on their own. So, I shifted how I handled everything. I stopped giving her full control. But I didn't say that directly. I just changed how I showed up. I started asking for confirmations. Specific ones. Not general updates. Actual details. Invoices. Emails. Vendor contacts. Things that couldn't be adjusted after the fact. At first, she didn't resist it. She just responded the way she always had.
Calm.
Organized.
Confident. But there was a difference now.
A slight delay. A hesitation before answering. Like she was adjusting to something new. That told me I was moving in the right direction. I also started reaching out to vendors myself.
Quietly.
Not announcing it. Just checking. Confirming details she had already told me were finalized. And that's when things started to break. The florist told me they had updated the order recently. Based on new preferences. Not mine. The venue mentioned changes to the layout. Again, not requested by me. The guest list had been expanded beyond what I approved. And those weren't assumptions anymore. They were confirmed. Directly.
From the people involved.
That was the moment it shifted completely. Because now it wasn't just a pattern I noticed. It was something I could verify. Something that existed outside of my perspective. I didn't confront her immediately. I waited. Because I wanted to see how far it went. And how comfortable she was continuing it. So I let her keep planning. Let her keep updating me. And I watched the difference between what she said and what actually existed. And it didn't take long. Every update she gave me was slightly different from what I confirmed. Not dramatically. Just enough. Enough to keep control. Enough to shape the outcome. That's when I realized something else. This wasn't just about preference. It was about ownership. She wasn't helping me plan my wedding. She was planning her version of it. And I was being placed into it after the fact. That realization didn't feel emotional. It felt precise. Because once you understand intention, you don't need to guess anymore. I tested it one more time. Something bigger this time. The seating arrangement. I gave her a clear version. Specific placements. People I wanted together. People I didn't. She agreed. Same way as always. Said it made sense. Said she would finalize it. A few days later, I checked directly with the venue.
And it had been changed.
Not slightly. Completely reorganized. Based on a different structure. One that prioritized her guest list, her connections, her preferences. That was the confirmation I needed. Not a suspicion, not a pattern, just fact. I didn't feel the need to keep testing after that, because I already knew. Everything I needed to understand was clear. The only thing left was deciding what to do with it. I started taking control back.
Quietly.
I contacted vendors directly, updated details myself, corrected things without going through her. And I didn't tell her immediately, because I wanted to see her reaction when things didn't go her way. And it didn't take long. She noticed.
Of course she did.
Small comments at first, asking why certain things had been changed, why she wasn't included, why I didn't tell her. And I answered simply. I wanted to handle it myself. That was the first time I set a boundary. Not aggressively, just clearly. And that changed the dynamic immediately, because for the first time, she wasn't in control of the outcome. And that's when I saw it, not in what she said, but in how she reacted. The calmness shifted slightly, the confidence adjusted, and the tone became more careful. That was the moment everything became clear. This wasn't about helping. It was about control. And once that control started slipping, the situation changed. Because now it wasn't about planning anymore. It was about who was going to decide what this wedding actually became.
And, for the first time,
that decision wasn't in her hands anymore. That's when I knew. The next step wasn't observation. It was confrontation. By the time I confronted her, I wasn't unsure anymore. There was nothing left to figure out. No missing pieces. No doubt. Just a clear understanding of what had been happening. And how long it had been happening without me stopping it. I didn't choose a dramatic moment. I didn't wait for the perfect setting. Because I didn't need one. Clarity doesn't need preparation. It just needs to be said. She was at the house when I walked in, going through documents,
notes, lists,
the same way she had been since the beginning. Like everything was still hers to manage. And for a second I just watched. Not emotionally, just noticing. Because that was the last time I would see her in that role. I sat down across from her.
Calm.
No build-up. No hesitation. And I said, I've been checking everything directly. She looked up, not surprised, just attentive. What do you mean? Still controlled, still composed. The same tone she had always used. And for a moment, it almost felt like she could redirect it again, like she always had. But this time, I didn't give her that space. I spoke to the florist. I said it simply. No accusation. No emotion attached to it. Your order didn't match what I chose. There was a pause. Small. But there. Then she responded.
Come.
It was a better option.
Same pattern.
Same structure. An answer that replaced instead of explained. I didn't react to it. I continued. I spoke to the venue. Another pause. Slightly longer this time. The layout was changed without me. She shifted slightly in her chair. Not uncomfortable. Just aware now. Still controlled. It needed to be adjusted. Again. Not a discussion. A decision already made. And that was the moment I stopped listing things. Because I didn't need to. The pattern was already clear. I looked at her, directly,
and said,
You've been changing everything I chose. No emotion. No raised voice. Just the truth. And for the first time, she didn't answer immediately. That silence mattered. Because up until that point, she always had something ready. Something structured. Something that made it sound reasonable.
But now,
there wasn't a version of it that could be explained the same way. After a few seconds, she spoke. Carefully. I was making it better. That was her explanation. Not denial. Not confusion. Just justification. And that told me everything. Because she wasn't saying it didn't happen. She was saying it was intentional. I nodded. Not in agreement. Just acknowledging that I heard her. And then I said, It's not your wedding. That was the shift.
Clear.
Final. And I saw it land. Not dramatically, but completely. Because for the first time, there was no space to adjust it. No way to redirect it. She tried to respond. Something about experience. About knowing what works. About wanting the best outcome. But it didn't carry the same weight anymore. Because the intention had already been exposed. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't push anything further. Because I didn't need to.
I just said,
I'm taking over from here. Simple.
direct.
And that was it. That was the moment everything changed. Because control doesn't end with conflict. It ends with clarity. And for the first time, there was no confusion about who was making the decisions. She didn't agree. Not fully. But she didn't challenge it either. Not in a way that mattered. Because the structure had already shifted. I started contacting vendors myself. Updating everything. Reverting changes. Finalizing details the way I originally intended. And I did it directly. Without going through her. Without asking for input. Because this time, it wasn't about collaboration.
It was about ownership. She tried to stay involved.
At first. Small suggestions.
Comments.
Ways to stay connected to the process. But I didn't give that space anymore. Not aggressively. Just consistently. And over time that involvement faded. Not completely. But enough. Enough that the decisions stayed where they were supposed to be. With me. And that changed everything. Not just the wedding. But the dynamic. Because for the first time, I wasn't adjusting around her. I wasn't accepting changes. I wasn't stepping back. I was deciding. And once that happened, there was no way to return to how it had been before. Because now it was clear. This wasn't something that could be shared the way it had been. It had to be held. And I was the one holding it. That was the shift. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just complete. Because from that point on, there was no version of this where it wasn't my wedding anymore. After that conversation, everything became quieter. Not in a tense way, just more defined. There was no confusion about roles anymore. No overlap. No shared control. And that alone changed how everything felt. My mom didn't step back completely. That wouldn't have been realistic. But her involvement changed. Noticeably. She asked more. Suggested less. And when I made decisions, they stayed as they were. That was new. Because before, nothing stayed the same for long. Now it did. And that consistency mattered more than anything else. I took over everything fully. Vendor calls. Final confirmations. Payments. Details that I had trusted her with before. And doing it myself didn't feel overwhelming. It felt grounding. Because for the first time, every decision connected directly to me. Nothing was being filtered. Nothing was being adjusted without me knowing. Everything matched. And that clarity made the process feel different. Not stressful. Just mine. Daniel noticed it too. Not just the changes in the planning, but in me. The way I spoke. The way I decided things without hesitation. The way I didn't look for approval anymore. And he didn't question it. He supported it. Because he had seen the pattern too. He had just been waiting for me to see it clearly. The weeks leading up to the wedding felt steady. Not rushed. Not chaotic. Just focused. Every detail stayed where it was placed. Every decision remained intact. And for the first time since planning started, nothing shifted underneath me. That was the biggest difference. The absence of change. Because before, everything looked stable until it wasn't. Now, it actually was. My mom still made comments occasionally. Small ones. Suggestions about what could be improved. What might work better. But they stayed as suggestions. They didn't turn into actions. And that's how I knew things had changed. Not because she stopped, but because I didn't allow it to move past that point. That boundary stayed consistent. And over time, it became normal. The day of the wedding came quietly. Not overwhelming. Not stressful. Just clear. Everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. The venue looked the way I had chosen. Not adjusted. Not replaced. The flowers matched what I picked. The seating reflected the plan I made. Every detail felt familiar. Because it was mine. I remember walking into the space before everything started. Just standing there for a moment. Looking at everything.
And recognizing it.
Not as something that had been built around me, but something I had actually created. That feeling stayed with me. Not emotional. Just settled. My mom was there. Of course she was. And she moved through everything the way she always had. Organized. Present. But different.
She didn't step in.
Didn't adjust anything. Didn't redirect anything. She stayed where she was. And that was enough. Because for the first time, she wasn't controlling the outcome. She was just part of it. The ceremony itself was exactly what I wanted. Simple.
Calm.
Nothing excessive. Nothing forced. And that mattered more than anything else. Because it reflected the original idea. The one I almost lost at the beginning. The reception felt the same. Familiar. Aligned. Every detail holding its place. Without being changed into something else. And as everything moved forward, I realized something. This wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about what happens when you stop letting someone else reshape your decisions and start holding them yourself. That's what changed. Not just the outcome, but the process.
Because once I saw the pattern
and chose to stop it, everything else followed naturally. After the wedding, things with my mom didn't go back to how they were before. But they didn't break either. They just adjusted. There was more distance in certain areas. More clarity in others. Unspoken understanding about where the boundaries were. And that made things simpler. Not perfect, but stable. I didn't bring it up again. I didn't revisit the situation.
Because I didn't need to.
The outcome had already said everything. I think about it sometimes. Not in a negative way. Just in a way that reminds me. Because that experience showed me something clearly. That control doesn't always look obvious. Sometimes it looks like help. Like support. Like efficiency. Until you look at the result. And realize it no longer belongs to you. And once you see that, you can't ignore it. You have to decide what to do with it. For me, that decision was simple. I took it back.
Quietly. Consistently.
Without turning it into something bigger than it needed to be. And that made all the difference. Because in the end, it wasn't about stopping her. It was about choosing not to step back anymore. That was the shift. And once it happened, everything stayed where it was supposed to be. With me. If you've ever had someone take over something that was supposed to be yours, even in a way that looked helpful at first, you probably understand this story. Sometimes control doesn't look like control until you see where it leads. And once you do, the only thing that matters is whether you take it back. If this story made you think about something in your own life, let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, there are more waiting for you right here.